Win big in 2023 with Team Sync from RotoBaller. Import your fantasy teams and sync your leagues. Get customized tools and tailored advice for your specific rosters and scoring settings, including live recommendations from the Live Draft Assistant, Free Agent Finder, and Lineup Optimizer. Sync an unlimited amount of NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL fantasy teams from all of the major fantasy platforms. Get a discount for any premium pass using my promo code KNUCKLER, KNUCKLER, one who throws knuckleballs. Just visit rotoballer.com/radio and start rotoballing like a boss. And what's up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you episode 102 of RotoBaller's official MMA podcast. Tap that, and we are looking forward to a UFC London card kicking off at noon on Saturday.
Break out the red panties.
That means I will be in the RotoBaller MMA Discord from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. on Saturday talking UFC London. We got 15 fights on this card. Now, I need to catch up on the most recent episode of The Ultimate Fighter. Based on the internet, it sounds like things continue to go poorly for the prospects, but I got to think that Conor at least gets one win. We'll see, because like I said, I got to catch up. And my lord, last week, Holly Holm fought a great fight, but ends up getting submitted. That was a fun main event. And then there's been so much MMA news outside of actual fighting. This past week, I have to have frequent guest co-host Connor Sloan back on the show to talk about some of these news tidbits. You can follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. You can follow the podcast, like and subscribe on YouTube and Facebook at Tap That MMA Podcast, and check out all the interlude episodes that I've been putting out. Most recently, Ryan Phillips, the King of Kings of Power Slap. We have a discussion about the controversial new organization. And we got interlude episodes coming. So, folks, with that, let's get into UFC London. We got 15 fights, as I said, starting off with a flyweight matchup between Rafael Filo and Daniel Barrez. Bruna Brazil and Shauna Bannon 5-0 in a women's strawweight matchup. At lightweight, Chris Duncan 10-1 against 7-0 Yanel Ashmuz. Ketlin Vieira at bantamweight against Penny Kianzit, and what is going to be a big fight for that weight class. Middleweight, Brian Barberena against Mahmoud Muradov. And we're going to see a lot of Europeans, a lot of Brits on this card. 6-0 Mick Parkin against Jamal Pogues at heavyweight. Lightweight, Mark Diakese against Joel Alvarez. Welterweight, Danny Roberts against Johnny Parsons. By the way, I'm coming to you Friday morning, so hopefully this will be a faster episode. Davey Grant at bantamweight against Daniel Marcos. Lerone Murphy, 145 against Josh Kulibau. Lightweight, Jai Herbert and Faraz Zayem. Middleweight, Andre Muniz and Paul the Bear Jew Craig. Nathaniel Wood versus Andre Fili in a men's featherweight matchup. The co-main event, Meatball Molly McCann in front of her home country again, where she gets fired up. She's taking on Julia Stolyarenko. And at heavyweight, Marcin Tybura is paired up against Tom Aspinall in his return in front of a London crowd. I'm excited about it. Let's get into it, starting off with Rafael Filo and Daniel Barrez. Where are the UFC odds for this? Okay, so on Best Fight Odds, they have these under the category of UFC 292. Don't know why that is, but Rafael Filo and Daniel Barrez is a pick'em -110 fight for each. Let's start with Filo. Filo, 30 years old. This is going to be his second UFC fight, third including the Contender Series. Came to us from Shooto, Brazil. He got subbed by Muhammad Makayev. His last time out, March of this year, by rear naked choke. He did win in the Contender Series with a knockout over Roybert Echeverria. Daniel Barrez, 34 years old. This will be his first UFC fight. His last loss was to Carlos Hernandez by split decision in the Contender Series. Since then, he has fought his way back with 4 straight knockouts, 3 straight in the UWC. Now, I don't know, because it's been a long time. In fact, it's been such a long time since Daniel Perez has been put away by any other means by submission. Most of his losses are by decision. But the guy that beat him back in 2014 was Manel Kopp by knockout. And that was a verbal TK. So it might, for all I know, it was an injury if it was that long ago. Look, Fiala has the Contender Series win. His loss in the UFC came to a really fast rising prospect, Muhammad Makayev. I think it just makes sense to go with the guy with the Contender Series win and the more UFC experience, who's also younger. Filo at minus 110, I think that is the best bet of that fight. I'm not comfortable going with a prop in this one. Next up, we got Bruna Brazil and Shauna Bannon. Bruna Brazil. 2 fights in the UFC, counting the Contender Series. Both ended in second-round knockout. One didn't go her way. That was the last fight against Denise Gomez. That was April 15th of 2023. Her win was against Man in the Contender Series. She landed 2 takedowns, got taken down 3 times. Denise Gomez took her down 3 times, too, so keep an eye on that. But she did get a second-round knockout in that fight. Shauna Bannon will be making her UFC debut. She is 5-0, coming to us out of Dublin, Ireland. 5 wins, 2 in Invicta. Love to see it. 3 in Cage Legacy. Now, her 2 Invicta opponents had a combined record of 9-4-1. That's pretty solid. Her last 3 wins have been by decision. The odds on this fight, Bruna Brazil is the minus 150 favorite. Shauna Bannon, the plus 130 underdog. Here's the thing. I count Invicta wins at a certain level. I will count 2 Invicta wins slightly above a Contender Series win, because sometimes you don't know what you're getting in the Contender Series, but to step up in a big organization, be noticed by a big organization like Invicta, it means you're coming from at least a good camp. And I think that this is a fight where, with the slight underdog in Shauna Bannon, I'm actually surprised that she's the slight underdog. I like Bruna Brazil, but Shauna Bannon being able to go the distance in her, last 3 fights and get the win on the judges' scorecards, I think that's the most likely way that this goes. And by the way, I think Rafael Filo wins that fight 65 times out of 100. And I think Shauna Bannon probably wins this fight 55 to 60 times out of 100. So I love her at plus 130. Hit it. And I would go Bannon by decision, plus 180. And it's barely a difference between her and a straight-up victory. But I think that's how she gets it done. And her nickname is Mama B. So that's pretty awesome, too. Next up, we got Chris Duncan and Yanel Ashmouz. Chris Duncan is the minus 150 favorite. Ashmouz the plus 130 underdog. Almost the same exact odds as the last fight. Let's start with Chris Duncan. So he's got 2 wins in the UFC. He lost his first Contender Series fight by second-round knockout to Varislav Borshev. Then he gets a knockout over Charlie Campbell, August of 2022 in the first round, and a split decision victory over Omar Morales, where he outstruck him 53-47 and got 5 takedowns in that fight. Ashmouz won his UFC debut with a first-round knockout over Sam Patterson, who I believe was the favorite at the time. I haven't seen enough of Ashmouz yet. I think that this makes sense as a closely handicapped fight. I was really impressed with what he did and surprised by what he did to Sam Patterson. But Chris Duncan has proven it in the UFC, and against a guy like Omar Morales, who, had been on a losing streak, but has fought a lot of tough guys, including Giga Chikadze, Jonathan Pierce, in this weight class. So I'm going to go Chris Duncan. I don't know how he necessarily wins the fight. I think he's a pretty solid value at minus 150. I think he wins the fight like 60 to 65 times out of 100. Duncan by TKO knockout is plus 250. I'm probably more comfortable with Duncan by decision plus 330, but I think those are almost equal value as far as the props go. If you're going Ashmouz, hell, I guess you go by TKO knockout. That is plus 250. That might be actually the best individual prop of the fight. Next up, we got Ketlin Vieira and Pani Kianzad. Penny Kianzad is the plus 130 underdog. Ketlen Vieira, the minus 150 favorite. That's 3 in a row that were the exact same odds. This is a big fight for the UFC women's bantamweight division. Ketlen Vieira ranked 5th in the world according to Tapology. Penny Kianzad ranked 6th in the world according to Tapology. Ketlen Vieira has won 2 of her last 3 against Misha Tate by unanimous decision. Holly Holm by split decision. Lost her last time out to Raquel Pennington by split decision. And that dates back to November of 2021. She's had, a lack of activity there for a few years, for sure. Penny Kianzad, she is the winner of 5 of her last 6. Now, granted, those are all decisions. They were victories over Jessica Rose Clark, Beth Correa, where she was landing high-volume strikes. That maybe makes her a good value if she comes in the $14 to $15 range in DFS. Decision victory over Sajara Eubanks, Alexa Davis. She landed at least 90 strikes in all 4 of those fights. Then she loses a unanimous decision to Raquel Pennington, where she actually could have won that fight. It was, 50 to 48 on the striking, 1 takedown each. It was, a pretty close fight, but Raquel Pennington's good at eking those out. And then her last time out, April of 2022, over a year ago, was a win against Lena Landsberg. She outstruck her 78 to 39 and landed 1 takedown. At least Ketlen Vieira has been more active. Now, what makes me nervous is that the last 2 victories she had are against the likes of Misha Tate and Holly Holm. It's just a little bit different than fighting someone who's, not trying to hang around the top, but is trying to get there. Now, as we saw last week, Holly Holm, despite losing, still very much a strong fighter in this weight class. They both had close fights with Raquel Pennington. Really, from a betting aspect, what do I think is the individual most likely outcome? I don't know. I think Penny Kianzad wins this fight 45 times out of 100. And so at plus 130, I think that's an excellent value. Hit it. Ow! And the fight to go the distance, that's minus 300. Tells you something there. Vieira by decision is plus 120. Kianzad by decision is plus 180. I think if you take either of these fighters, you go with those 2 options. Next up, we got Brian Barberena and Mahmoud Muradov. Mahmoud Muradov, the minus 345 favorite. Brian Barberena, the plus 265 underdog. How can you ever count Brian Barberena out that much? Is there a prop for that?
One comment, man. One comment.
Oh, don't be scared, homie.
You're Brian Barberena. There's nothing to be scared about. You've shared the cage with the likes of Vicente Luque, Leon Edwards, Colby Covington, Sage Northcutt, if that counts, Matt Brown, Robbie Lawler, RDA, and Gunnar Nelson. He's the winner of 3 of his last 5, but has lost 2 in a row. Granted, they were submissions to Gunnar Nelson and Rafael Dos Anjos. Those 3 wins came against Darian Weeks, Matt Brown, and Robbie Lawler between December of 2021 and July of 2022. His last fight was March of 2023, and in that 3-fight winning streak, he landed over 100 strikes in every fight, including 147 en route to knocking out ruthless Robbie Lawler. Mahmoud Muradov, loser of 2 in a row, to Kai Barella by unanimous decision. Kai Barella, who has the ability to slow you down to his pace. He has a crazy range, good footwork, and he caught a lot of people by surprise on his way up. And then he had a submission loss to Gerald Mearshart August of 2021. Muradov, a guy that has not been very active at all. Born in 1990, wasting some valuable years here. But he started in the UFC on a 3-fight winning streak between September of 2019 and January 2021, including 2 third-round knockouts. He got a win over Andrew Sanchez and Alicia Di Chirico. Call me crazy. I don't know why you would. I don't know why you would call this crazy even. Look, Brian Barberena has been more active. You could say that he fought aging guys or that he fought, those were fights that were meant to be brawls. Whatever, man. I have not seen anything to tell me that Mahmoud Muradov is a Gunnar Nelson or an RDA. We haven't seen enough of him. And his last 2 fights were losses. He beat Trevor Smith and Andrew Sanchez by outstriking them. He has his only takedowns have come in losses, except for one against Trevor Smith. Brian Barberena wins this fight 45 times to 50 out of 100. Smack that very, very hard at plus 265. And then I think the most likely outcome, I think, is Barberena by decision. We haven't seen enough of Murdoch for me to tell how he wins. That Barberena by decision is plus 650.
Break out the red panties.
Enough said. Let's move on to Mick Parkin and Jamal Pogues at heavyweight. Mick Parkin is the plus 130 underdog. Jamal Pogues is the minus 160 favorite. Let's start with Mick Parkin, 6-0, coming out of the UK, fighting out of England, 27 years old, has a 79-inch reach, currently ranked 94th in the world at heavyweight. 5 of his 6 wins are by knockout. All have come inside the distance. He came to us and has professional kickboxing experience and plenty of amateur fights that all ended in knockout too. He hasn't fought in 2023. In fact, he fought twice in 2022, but his last one was in August of last year in the Contender Series. He got a round 1 rear naked choke. It was his first professional submission. The guys did not have great records that he fought leading up to the Contender Series, but heavyweight's a weird class when you're trying to identify prospects. Let's talk about Jamal Pogues, who is 27 years old, has a 77-inch reach. Most of his career wins have come by decision. The other 5 have come inside the distance, obviously. And here, this is where it's tough, right? Because he's got 3 losses. One was his first pro fight. The other one was a submission in Bellator back in 2018. And then his last loss was a championship LFA light heavyweight fight against Alex Polizzi, who's been doing good things in Bellator since then. He has a Contender Series win by unanimous decision. He has a unanimous decision victory over Josh Parisian. Doesn't mean a whole lot these days, but it means a lot more to me than what Mick Parkin's got going for him on his resume. I give less credit to outside of the organization talent, usually at heavyweight. I just, this guy has proven it in the UFC. One hasn't. Jamal Pogues, I think, wins this fight 60 to 65 times out of 100. I think minus 160 is a solid value, and I think he does it by decision. That's how he's been winning fights. Plus 180 is the prop odds for that. I think the odds makers correctly reflect that. And then if you're going Mick Parkin, I think you go inside the distance. That they have, let's see. Do they not have Parkin inside the distance? They don't. So I would go Parkin by TKO knockout plus 420. Or if you find inside the distance, just go with that. But I can't find that number. Let's move on. We're already 6 fights deep. On to the 7th. Mark Diakise and Joel Alvarez. Diakise is the plus 165 underdog. Alvarez the minus 195 favorite. Let's start first with Diakise. Winner of 2 of his last 3, dating back to March of 2022. Hasn't fought in 2023, but he got 3 in last year. All decisions. Unanimous decision victories over Vyacheslav Borshev, where he got 11 takedowns. A win against Damir Hadzovic, where he got 8 takedowns. And then he lost to Michael Johnson by unanimous decision his last time out. He got outstruck 83 to 55. Didn't get a single takedown. It's weird. When he loses, it's like, it's just weird that there's a guy that can take someone down 3, 4, 8, 11 times. And then against other guys like Rafael Alves, Rafael Fizayev, Nasrat Haqparast, Dan Hooker, Drakkar Klose, and Michael Johnson, the takedowns are not given. That guy was born 1993, has a 73-inch reach. Joel Alvarez has a 4-inch reach advantage, born in the same year. He has won 4 of his last 5. He is 4-2 in the UFC. His only losses came to Damir Ismagulov by unanimous decision back in 2019 and Arman Sarukian by second-round knockout. Hard to give him too much flack for those losses. And he has a victory over Thiago Moises. Now, that was back in November 2021 by first-round knockout. All of his UFC wins have been inside the distance. 2 submissions, 2 knockouts. Sarukian took Alvarez down twice. This is what concerns me, is that Alvarez has been taken down by almost all of his opponents, especially after his first loss where he just got outstruck by Damir Ismagulov. If Diakise can get this down to the ground even a few times, he doesn't even do much once he's there. In his wins over Hadzovic and Borshev, He only landed a combined 30 strikes, but his opponents only landed a combined 17. It was the 19 takedowns that did it. So I think this is like a 50-50 fight, and it's on the flip of a coin of whether Joe Alvarez will be able to stuff the takedowns of Mark Diakese. I think that if it's on, as long as it's on the feet, Diakese is in danger. But it's just like Diakese isn't Demirez Magalov or Joe or Arman Sarukian, though. I'll say that Joe Alvarez wins this fight actually 65 times out of 100. He is such a better striker that I think it'll most likely keep Diakese out of range. But, Diakese only needs a few to be able to slow the fight down to his pace. Plus 165 is not horrible. Minus 195 is not horrible. Maybe I don't touch a straight-up victor there. If you like Diakese, go by decision. That's plus 350. Alvarez, I think you go inside the distance. That's minus 115. I think that's a pretty solid value. And that's how he's won every fight. It's been split between submission and knockout. I think that's the best way to go. Next up, we got Danny Roberts and Johnny Parsons. Danny Roberts is the minus 125 favorite. Parsons the plus 105 underdog. Let's start off with Johnny Parsons, winner in the Contender Series, October of 2021. He is 8-3 as a professional, 31 years old. That was his last fight, was October of 2021. It was a split decision win in the Contender Series. And he had a good run with a bunch of knockouts in Icon Fighting Federation. Give him credit for that, for sure. But that is concerning. Activity, in an era where people are more active than ever. There's more fighters, obviously. But there's a lot more fighters that, are getting that work and, 2-3 times a year and making strides. Now, Danny Roberts has been more active, not necessarily more successful. Winner of 2 of his last 4, but loser of 2 in a row by unanimous decision to Francisco Trinaldo, who pieced him up on the feet 80-36. Then he got knocked out in the first round by Jack Della Maddalena. Hard to blame him there in November of 2022, and outstruck 33-5. His last 2 wins, a split decision victory over Ramazan Ameev. He got outstruck 40-34 and taken down 2 times to 1. And then a second round knockout against Zalim Amadaev. Outstruck him 37-28, knocked him down once, and en route to a knockout, 1 takedown each. Losses to Michel Pereira, Claudio Silva. He has a win over David Zawada. Lost to Nordine Talib and Mike Perry. Danny Roberts has been in the UFC since December of 2015. Do I blame a guy for... Parsons, he's 8-3. He came from Icon. He hasn't fought since October of 2021. It was a split decision in the Contender Series. I got to give Danny Roberts more credit than that, especially when his last, 2 losses are to reputable opponents. His last loss to an absolute young killer. And a fight, his last win was by split decision as recently as Parsons is. I think that's enough for me to say that Roberts wins this fight 55 times out of 60. So at minus 125, hit it.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
Oh, don't be scared, homie. Come on.
I pressed the wrong sound drop. And as far as route to a victory, I don't know. It's tough. These guys, their last fight was both by split decision, but they have a history of finishing people. I don't know. Let's see. Odds that the fight goes the distance, plus 150. Roberts by decision is plus 250. Roberts inside the distance, plus 225. That might be the best prop of the fight right there. And I think that it's probably about the same for both of them when you're talking about the value of inside the distance and by decision. I think that's like 4 equal value props. Next up, we are on the 9th fight. It is a bantamweight matchup between Davey Grant and Daniel Marcos, who is 14-0, I believe, fighting out of like Peru or Portugal. No, that's Peru. We'll see, flag-wise. And Davey Grant is the plus 120 underdog. Marcos the minus 140 favorite. Let's start with Davey Grant. Winner of 2 in a row against solid opponents. And he has a win this year, 2023. That was a 3rd round knockout against Luis Smolka. who he was smoking on the feet, 81-71, and got a knockdown en route to the knockout. And then got a round 3 inverted triangle against Rafael Asuncao March of this year, 65-42 on the striking. He did get taken down 5 times, though, and got a knockdown. 2 losses before that, and guess who it was? And a 3-fight winning streak before that, 2 losses sandwiched in between, both decision losses to Marlon Chito Vera and Adrian Yanez. And he got outstruck 198 by Yanez. It was a close fight with both of those guys. Daniel Marcos, 2-0 in the UFC, counting the Contender Series, a unanimous decision victory over Brandon Lewis. He outstruck him 81-45. 2 takedowns for Brandon Lewis, a knockdown for Marcos. Then he finished Simon Oliveira in round 2 of January of this year at UFC 283. Outstruck him 53-23 and got a knockdown on the route to the knockout. I like Daniel Marcos. But, what's this sleeping on Davey Grant? Look at his 2 last wins, and the names that they're against. Look at who the losses are to. He has a win against Jonathan Martinez back in March of 2021, who he knocked out in the 2nd round. Davey Grant as the underdog.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
Oh, don't be scared, homie. Come on.
Now, I think Davey Grant, I think this is at least a 50-50 fight. If you're giving all the credit in the world to Marcos' talent, even, 55-45 for Marcos, I think plus 120 for Davey Grant is a great value. And I think you go Davey Grant inside the distance, plus 275. I love that. Hit it. And for Marcos, I think it's a little less clear cut. I think that Davey Grant has proven really tough, even in his fights with world-class competition. Marcos by decision, plus 200. I think that is the best prop for Daniel Marcos. Next up, we got Lerone Murphy and Josh Culibao at featherweight. Lerone Murphy, the minus 140 favorite. Culibao, the plus 120 underdog. Let's start with Lerone Murphy, who is the favorite, right? Just said that. Yep, minus 140. Lerone Murphy on a 4-fight winning streak. The first fight in the UFC that he had was September 2019. He lost it by split decision, got taken down 6 times by Zubaira Tukhugov. 4 wins in a row since then against Ricardo Ramos, first round knockout. Douglas Silva de Andrade, unanimous decision, outstriking both opponents. Makwan Amirkhani, who he knocked out in the 2nd round. Only 8 strikes were landed. Makwan Amirkhani got 5 takedowns, but still got knocked out. And then last time out, it had been his first fight in almost 2 years. March of 2023, a split decision victory over Gabriel Santos, outstruck him 93-69, got taken down 5 times to 1. Josh Culibao, winner 3 in a row. And he's 3-1-1 in the UFC. His loss was in his debut to Jalen Turner by 2nd round knockout. Hard to fault him there. Had the split draw with Charles Jourdain that I in my memory, I thought he won, but I forget. Charles Jours was in a few of those fights. 3 wins in a row, though, against Shailen Nerdembeki by unanimous decision. Songwoo Chu by split decision. He landed a combined 104 strikes in those fights. He did get taken down a combined 3 times. And his last time out, he got a submission over Melzik Bagdasaryan. It was a 2nd round rear naked choke. Here, Josh Culibao does not put up the volume I would like to see to be able to beat a guy like Lerone Murphy. Lerone, I think, against better fighters, has shown that he is more able to take the pace to where he wants it to be. Josh Culibao is not going to be a threat to take Lerone Murphy down 5 times in this fight, and that's what made his last 2 fights tough, and he still ended up winning those. You have to be a better striker and be able to take him down, it seems like. And that's how Zubaira Tukhugov got a draw. I just realized that was a draw. Both these guys with draws on the record early in the UFC. I think that Lerone Murphy, just at straight up minus 140, is probably the best bet of this fight. I think he wins this fight 60-65 times out of 100. Trying to call an outcome here is tough. Culibao has been knocked out, but I think it's like 50-50 between decision and a knockout for Lerone Murphy. So Murphy inside the distance plus 350 by TKO knockout, also plus 350. By submission, it's plus 1,800. All right, that adds up. Murphy by decision plus 140. I think like just by knockout plus 350 and plus 140. I don't know. I think TKO knockout by plus 350 is actually the better value for Lerone Murphy. I think that's how he gets it done in proportion, price-wise. I think it's the best value. For Culibao, I think that his most likely path to victory is just by decision and what would probably be a close fight. Culibao by decision plus 300. That's the best prop for him. Next up, we got Jai Herbert and Fares Ziam. This is England versus France. Herbert is the plus 145 underdog. Ziam the minus 170 favorite. Okay. This is another close fight. Let's start with Ziam. Winner of 3 of his last 4. He did get rear naked choked by Terrence T-Rex McKinney, which is something Terrence has not been able to replicate in a long time. That was back in February of 2022. Wins over Luigi Vendramini by majority decision. Jamie Malarkey, who took him down 5 times, but he still got the unanimous decision because he outstruck him 47-20. And then last time out, September of 2022, against Michael Figlag, outstruck him 60-28 and got 3 takedowns to 1. Jai Herbert will have a 2-inch reach advantage with his 77-inch reach. He is 9 years older, surprisingly, than Ziam, who was born in 1997. He's 2-1-1 in his last 4 fights, and that came against Kama Worthy, a first-round knockout, a unanimous decision victory over Kyle Nelson. The draw was against Ludwig Klein in March of 2023 in a very close matchup. Klein outstruck him 47-43, got 2 takedowns to 1. His other loss was a second-round knockout to Ilya Topuria. The draw was to Ludwig Klein. I think I said that. And then the 2 losses to start of his UFC career, round 3 knockout against Francisco Trinaldo and a second-round rear naked choke to Renato Moicano, who can do that to a lot of people on any given night. Ziam makes me nervous with the quality of his wins. The fact that they came October of 2020, June of 2021. Vendramini and Malarkey. Malarkey's the best win on his record, in my opinion. It's the most telling. And the Terrence McKinney loss shows me that he's susceptible. Herbert, only 2 wins in his time in the UFC, but being able to put away Kama Worthy, nice. The fact that, 2 of his losses are to Renato Moicano and Ilya Topuria. Herbert makes a lot of sense to me at plus 145.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
Oh, don't be scared, homie. Come on.
He's older. I don't know how he gets it done victory-wise, but I think that plus 145 is a great value. I think he wins this fight at least 45 times out of 100, maybe stretching up to 55. I'm dispelled with Ziam's lack of activity of late. Now, for Ziam, if you're picking an outcome, I think you go Ziam by decision. That might end up being the best prop of the fight, actually, because Ziam by decision plus 200, love it, hit it. I'm just not comfortable picking a route of victory for Herbert, given the sporadic nature of how he's gotten his wins. Next up, we got Andre Muniz and Paul Craig in a middleweight matchup. Andre Muniz, minus 210, the favorite. Craig, the plus 180 underdog. Let's start with Paul Craig. Loser of 2 in a row in really disappointing fashion. He was on a 4-fight winning streak. For all we know, we were looking at Paul Craig possibly getting a title shot because he had won 4 in a row against really good. All right, the 4 wins all came inside the distance. 3 in the first round, 2 by submission, 2 by knockout against Gadzhimurad Antigolov, Shogun Hua, Jamal Hill, and Nikita Krylov. There's just a UFC light heavyweight champion. Sort of. That's the subject of debate. I certainly think he was when he had the belt before he vacated it. But he's got a UFC champion in that winning streak. And the last time out, 2 losses by unanimous decision in first-round knockout against Volkan Ozdemir and Johnny Walker. I was really disappointed with his approach to the Volkan fight. It left a lot to be desired. I thought Paul Craig was a good underdog pick in both those fights, and he really bummed me out. And this is going to be a middleweight matchup. And so that's important because Paul Craig's coming down from 205 pounds. He's a big dude. I never think he's that big, but he is. Andre Muniz was the winner of 7 fights in a row in the UFC, counting the Contender Series since 2018. Among those wins were a round 1 submission victory by armbar over Bartosz Fabinski, a win over Jacare Souza by first-round armbar, a first-round armbar against Eric Anders. July of 2022, a unanimous decision victory over Uriah Hall, where he only had to land 17 strikes as he got 4 takedowns. And then last time out, it was his first fight since July of 22. It was February of this year, a third-round rear-naked choke loss to Brendan Allen in a fight that, I think, if memory serves, he was going into that third round probably ahead on the judges' scorecards and just couldn't hang on. Oh, man. What did I say the odds on this were? Craig plus 180. Man, I was so high on Muniz, before the Brendan Allen fight. I think everybody was. It kind of mirrors, how high I was on Craig going into his last 2 fights. This is going to be an adjustment, though, for Paul Craig. He is older by 3 years. Muniz has a 2-inch reach advantage. I don't think that his size is necessarily going to, prevent him. I don't know. Volkan's a big light heavyweight. Craig doesn't get taken down a whole lot. In fact, it's usually him doing the taking down of late. Oh, boy. Muniz plus... What is it? Minus 210. I think that's just a bit much. I think Paul Craig at minimum wins this fight 40 times out of 100. So at plus 180, I think he's the better value. Hit it. I think both of these guys end up getting a win inside the distance. I think that this kind of stylistic matchup forces finishes out of fighters like this. So fight doesn't go to decision is minus 280, so the odds makers kind of agree with me there. Muniz by submission, plus 150. Muniz inside the distance, plus 100. I think, what? Okay. Muniz by submission, plus 150, I think is the best prop value for him. And then I would go Craig inside the distance. That's plus 275. That is his best prop value of that fight. Next up, 3 fights to go. A featherweight fight between Nathaniel Wood and Andre Touchy Fili, the worst nickname in the sport. Fili is the plus 175 underdog, Wood the minus 205 favorite. Let's talk about Touchy Fili first. God, I hate that nickname. 1 win since June of 2020. Now, 1 was a no contest, but in between, losses to Bryce Mitchell, hard to fault him there by unanimous decision, and Joanderson Brito, hard to fault him there, and that was a first-round knockout. 2 wins since June of 2020. A split decision victory over Charles Jourdain, where he got 5 takedowns. Last time out, a split decision victory over Bill Algeo, 81-59 on the striking for Algeo, 1 takedown for Fili. And then you have to go back to July of 2019 when he got a win against Shaman Moraes. A loss to Sodiq Youssef in between. He just does not, Andre Fili just does not have the striking volume for me to be comfortable that he's going to be able to come out on top on the judges' scorecards against a certain level of fighter. The question is, Nathaniel Wood, that level of fighter? I think he is. Let's look at the volume this guy's posted since July of 2020. Now, he came to the UFC June of 2018, started with 3 straight submission victories over Johnny Eduardo, Andre Ewell, friend of the podcast, Andre Ewell, Mr. Highlight, and then win over Jose Quinones. He did get knocked out in round 3 by John Dodson. His other UFC loss by unanimous decision to Casey Kenny, where he outlanded him 136-123, but got taken down twice. That's why he lost on the judges' scorecards. 2-fight winning streak over Charles Rosa and Charles Jourdain by unanimous decision. He landed 97 strikes each time, landed a combined 6 takedowns en route to those victories. And Charles Jourdain landed 86 strikes. Charles Rosa landed 51. I think Nathaniel Wood is going to land at least 97 strikes in this fight. Have him in your DFS lineup. And I think Andre Fili is going to land about 51 to 86 strikes, just as Wood's last 2 opponents did. Maybe he gets a takedown or 2. Maybe this even goes to a split decision because Andre Fili has the ability to do that to you. But otherwise, Nathaniel Wood minus 205, I think he wins this fight 75 to 80 times out of 100. I just think stylistically, even though it might be close all of those times, I think that's a fight that Wood is going to keep coming out on top of. Wood by decision plus 110, hit it. And then the next best prop easily is Feely by decision plus 300. Now we are on to the co-main event of the evening. And we got a women's flyweight matchup between Meatball Molly McCann and Julia Stoliarenko. Stoliarenko, the plus 180 underdog. Molly McCann, Stoliarenko, the plus 180 underdog. Meatball, the minus 210 favorite. Let's start with Stoliarenko. She was born in 1993 as a 66-inch reach. They gave her to Molly McCann, so Molly McCann will get a victory in front of her home crowd. That is very clear. Now, it's not that Julia Stoliarenko has fought bums since she's entered the UFC in November of 2018. Losses to Leia Letson, Yana Santos, who was Yana Kunitskaya at the time. Submission loss. That was her first of two inside the distance loss in the UFC to Julia Avila. A unanimous decision loss to Alexis Davis. Her lone win came by first round armbar against Jessica Rose Clark July of last year. Her last fight was a first round knockout loss to Chelsea Chandler, who just got handled by Norma Dumont this past weekend. Ran the opposite direction. Hold on. Has been heavily memed, but that was October of last year, and she got knocked out in the first round. Molly McCann will be at a 4-inch reach disadvantage. She is 3 years older. She is the winner of 3 of her last 4 fights, though. She has these winning streaks, then she has losing streaks, but she typically, at least loses to reputable competition. Her losses are to Jillian Robertson, 2018, Tyla Santos, and Laura Procopio, both by decision. And then to Erin Blanchfield, her last time out November of last year by round 1 submission. That is the aspect that concerns me. But Molly McCann's 3-fight winning streak was very impressive. She landed a combined over 200 combined strikes against Yi Jeong Kim and Luana Carolina. She got the spinning back elbow knockout, her first against Luana Carolina. Did the same thing to Hannah Goldie July of last year in the first round. She's dangerous in all rounds. And it was a decision victory over Yi Jeong Kim, who was able to land 122 strikes against Molly McCann. Here's the question, okay? She's been subbed twice. The last one was a submission that involves an arm. That is the one way that I think Julia Stoliarenko has set herself apart in her professional career. If there was a prop for Julia Stoliarenko by armbar, I would take it. But Stoliarenko has just done nothing but lose. Her own, except for that one win against Jessica Rose Clark. So I was speaking a little polarized there. But there's just nothing to suggest that Julia Stoliarenko can beat a fighter in the UFC above the Jessica Rose Clark level, which is just the barely hanging around, older, but is a staple of the division. That's not enough to come out on top of Molly McCann in London. Molly McCann wins this fight 85 times out of 100. Minus 210. I don't know, string a parlay together with it. Now, how does Molly McCann most likely do it? I think she does it probably by knockout. She can do that to Julia Stoliarenko. She's done it to better fighters than Julia Stoliarenko. McCann by TKO knockout plus 140. Love it. Hit it. And then second, I think actually the second best prop is McCann by decision plus 225. And then Stoliarenko by submission plus 350. That's how you have to go if you're betting Stoliarenko. And now we are on to the main event of the evening. And folks, I'm at the 44-minute mark, and I'm almost through 15 fights. But Marcin Tybura in a heavyweight main event is being asked to handle Tom Aspinall in his return to the UFC after a devastating injury in what was supposed to be his rise to a title shot his last time out against Curtis Razor Blades. Marcin Tybura is the plus 350 underdog. Aspinall the minus 475 favorite. I will say, from the jump, you know that I am always skeptical when a guy like Marcin Tybura is a plus 350 underdog. Let's get into it. Tom Aspinall. was on a 5-fight winning streak, a really good one, going into his fight with Curtis Blades. He had finishes, he had 3 knockouts, 2 submissions against Jake Collier, Alan Badeau, Andrei Arlovsky, Sergey Spivak, and Alexander Volkov. My Lord.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
Oh, don't be scared, huh?
Don't do this. You cannot do this, you know?
And by the way, I'm saying that first one to Tom Aspinall returning from injury. I'm saying that second one, the Joanna drop to Marcin Tybura. My Lord, the level that Tom Aspinall was at before that injury against Curtis Blades. The only question mark in this fight is Tom Aspinall's health. Is he ready to possibly go the distance with a guy like Marcin Tybura, who's really good at making that happen? Is he going to be at the level we're expecting? Is he going to put Marcin Tybura away like he was doing to every single fighter? Guys like Volkov and Spivak, one of the top prospects in the weight class, the best gatekeeper currently that the weight class has to offer. Hell, there's a situation where Alexander Volkov could be the UFC heavyweight champion in the next year or two if he hangs around Michael Bisping style. Marcin Tybura, thankfully, also has a 78-inch reach. That will do some good for him. He has won 7 of his last 8 fights. Decision victory over Sergey Spivak, Maxime Grishin, Ben Rothwell. Knockouts over Greg Hardy and Walt Harris. 2 wins in a row. Decision victories over Alexander Romanov and Blagoy Ivanov. A fight that Romanov, a lot of people felt was the better fighter in, just didn't come out ahead on the scorecards. And Blagoy Ivanov, who he just did his Marcin Tybura thing against, 40-34 on the striking, 1 takedown. Tom Aspinall has got to be in DFS lineups. You know he's going to be at a very high volume. He is the fighter that everybody is going to be tuning in to watch on Saturday at noon. Tybura's loss, by the way, in between was a unanimous decision victory loss to Alexander Volkov. He has 2 knockouts in that stretch, but all the rest of those 7 victories were by decision. And even the loss was by decision. That's how Tybura wins things. And if Tybura is going to win this, it's going to be by decision. Tybura by decision is plus 1,600. Now, that is contingent on Aspinall having ring rust. That is contingent on some mental factors being there with Aspinall. Maybe his health confidence isn't all the way up to where it should be at that point. But that's how Tybura wins it. If his hand is raised at the end, it will be because he won on the judges' scorecards. Plus 1,600, that could be worth $2. I don't know. That's his best prop. But Aspinall inside the distance, minus 360. I think Aspinall is more likely to knock Tybura out. I think that if you want to grapple with Tybura, it actually could, it could draw the fight out a little bit more than you want it to. And I think Aspinall will be going in to make a statement in front of the London crowd. Aspinall by TKO knockout minus 165. I love that prop. Hit it. And I'm definitely not taking a straight up victor here. But I do think Aspinall wins this fight 75, 80, 85 times out of 100. There's a wider range, obviously, because of the health factor. Coming back from a devastating injury, the ring rust, the mental and psychological aspects. Tybura is a tough fight anytime out. I just think Tybura is just a little bit underneath what would be a true danger to Tom Aspinall on Saturday. You give him in another world where he hasn't fought Volkov, you give him a Volkov, I have a lot more questions. But Aspinall against Marcin Tybura, I can say that I think he will overpower him. And folks, that is it for episode 102 of RotoBaller's official MMA podcast. Tap that. I am Brady Grove. You can follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady Grove. Follow the Tap That podcast. Like and subscribe on YouTube and Facebook at Tap That MMA podcast. Go to Spotify. Subscribe. Leave us a 5-star review. Stuff like that. Watch the YouTube videos because I'm putting more of those out in video form. And check out all the interlude episodes that I'm putting out. More still to come. Check out the conversation with Ryan Phillips, the King of Kings of Power Slap from this week. Go back and watch the Shoney Carter interview. That's a trip. Folks, thanks for listening. I'm coming to you Friday morning. Have yourselves a great early Saturday UFC card. Peace.